Sweden under review, Ulf Bittner. Very, very welcome to Dexter and Emil.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Dexter, you are sitting down there in South Africa. Emil Borg is sitting in Gothenburg, and he is the Swedish ambassador of one small little town you have met before. And Dexter, you have to give us a little background about who is Dexter.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ulf. Thank you, Emil. It is really great. Thank you for the invite. I really appreciate it. And it's actually good to be speaking to you gentlemen. So who am I? I am Dexter Ryneveldt. I am practicing a lawyer here in South Africa. I have been practicing law now for 15 years. And one of the things that I always make sure that I clarify, because within South Africa, you need to make a clear distinction. When you say you are a lawyer, it's almost like, in a sense, you're going to have to define what kind of a lawyer. And I know in the United Kingdom, and that's the Commonwealth countries, you have your solicitors, you have your barristers. In South Africa, you have solicitor is your attorney, and then you have your barrister, which is your advocate. And that's basically where I fit into the lawyer picture. So I am an advocate in South Africa. That's an advocate of the Supreme Court of South Africa. And like I have stated, yes, I have now been practicing for 15, going in for 16 years. And I have much more of a general commercial kind of a practice here in South Africa. And how it all relates is that as an advocate, you are a sole proprietor. So you are not permitted to actually enter into any partnership with any other legal advocate. You have to work on your own. So born and bred in South Africa, I have traveled quite extensively as well also due to the fact that I wanted to experience different cultures and actually getting to understand and appreciate what we have here in South Africa. And other aspect concerning myself, I am a firm believer of sovereignty. And when this COVID-19 pandemic was rolled out approximately 3 years ago, that's then where I have came to the full realization that it is important that when we talk about sovereignty, we talk about sovereignty, individual sovereignty, and that individual sovereignty is an aspect which we as humanity needs to appreciate. And I've seen that basically chipped away that sovereignty, yield sovereignty, personal sovereignty itself. And that then prompted me to get involved and trying to see as to how best one can then protect that sovereignty, that yield sovereignty. And that's then where I started to reach out to Rainer Fulmich. And since 2 years ago, we have then been in continuous communication, and I've actually worked with him, and that's with a number of other attorneys from all different continents worldwide, where we have conducted the grand model jury proceedings. And that was merely just on the basis so that all the evidence that has actually came to the fore concerning the COVID-19 pandemic, so that people from all over the world can get to understand. But there are actually sufficient evidence to put before any competent court, and any competent court worldwide must be and should then be in a position to make a determination as to whether what has been presented based on evidence is prima facie evidence that we are not talking about a pandemic, but we are talking about a plandemic. Thank you.
You named Rainer and Fulmich, the lawyer from Germany, and you know, as I know, as Emil know, that he is in prison in Germany, Frankfurt, if I remember. and I have wrote to the other lawyer in the group, Dagmar Schön, to do an interview with him, especially about the situation, or with Dagmar. And that's the end of this story. We will not speculate anything about that situation. So we will go further. As we know, all of us, the Expose had an article a few days ago. I sent it to you and asked you if you could comment about that article and the Maori project, as you and as Reiner has been involved in, and explain a little about what happened and what you see now is exposed in the article on the Expose, please.
Thank you very much, Ulf, concerning that question. I think it is so important that first things first is that your listeners needs to understand how is it that me and Reiner got involved with the Maori in New Zealand. And that is basically all linked to the grand model jury proceedings, which we had, that was last year. And on the basis of the response that we've received from all the millions of people worldwide who has watched the grand jury model proceedings, they wanted to know, but is it going to be possible to really keep the perpetrators accountable? Because right now we are talking about really keeping them to account for what they have done as a direct consequence of this pandemic. That then made us, and that is then the international attorneys, to say that we need to get an independent jurisdiction. And that independent jurisdiction will then be able to provide us then the necessary platform in order then to present all the necessary evidence. And that is then in light of what the medical and the scientific experts will then present. And it will then be up to that independent jurisdiction to make then the necessary decision as to whether indeed a crime or against humanity has been perpetrated against the populace of the world. So that was around about October last year, where I've actually watched a Stu Peters show. And on this particular show, there was a lady from New Zealand. Her name is Antoinette. And she has explained in quite detail that when it comes to Maori, New Zealand, they do have an independent jurisdiction, and they can then present the necessary platform in order for us as the international attorneys then to present the evidence, and they can then ultimately make a determination. And with that determination as well, also they will then be able to bring into effect the necessary enforcement. So what I've then done, I have actually discussed it with the group of the international attorneys, Ryneveldt et al. And they have then informed me that, yes, let's try and see as to how far we can get with the New Zealand Maori initiative. That's then when I started to reach out to Antoinette. And I will then say she then placed us in a contact. And one of the first groups that she has placed us in contact with, that's Reiner and myself, that is the Wakamaninga Maori government. And this is then the Maori government that is being mentioned within this expose newspaper article. And we have since then, February of this year, we have been in continuous communication, that's myself and Reiner, with Wakamaninga Maori government, but not just with them in themselves, but we've actually also been in touch, and we had various different communications with different Maori groups, which are being referred to as hapus, and hapus is your communities within Maori Dim. And that is to get all these various factions of Maori Dim to work together, create a platform so that we as the international attorneys can then actually come and present then the necessary evidence. Unfortunately, we could not actually get all the different Maori factions to work together. And after 7 months of continuous communication, continuous Zoom meetings, me and Ryne ultimately came to the conclusion that unfortunately it is not going to be worthwhile for us to then present all this evidence only just to one small little group, hapu, within Maoridom, within New Zealand. And we've then ultimately then pulled out of New Zealand. But throughout this whole process, and I think what is important as well also, is that this Wakamanenga Maori government, they've proceeded, and what the readers, the listeners can actually then take from the Expo article is then the results, what they have ultimately came up with, and within their own court proceedings. And with their court proceedings, we are talking about the Koti, which is spelled K-O-O-T-I proceedings. That's your court proceedings, where they have then ultimately found 4 individuals in the higher echelons of the political domain who was basically on the forefront of COVID-19, where they have actually found them guilty. So we have not been involved with the grand jury proceedings. And for the reasons, as I have already actually stated, is that we didn't just want to work with one group. We wanted them to come together as a collective, and them, the Maori, to understand that there is no way that you can get any success if there is not going to be any unity, and where the Maori can then stand together and then make sure that they can then keep the people who were on the forefront in Maoridom, that is in New Zealand, accountable for what they have done. One of the other things as well also that has really drawn our attention to this independent jurisdiction is that when one have a historical backdrop and you look at the specific historical backdrop in New Zealand, you will get to understand that there is a base document, which me and Ryne has read, which has actually been circulated to all the international attorneys that has actually been working with me and Ryne. And that is then in respect to the He Wakaputanga 1835 declaration. And within this particular declaration, it has been made clear that Maori has not given up their sovereignty. And as a result, they have not given up their sovereignty, which in a matter of fact was ultimately also then recognized by the Russian government, which is also mentioned within the article. And that was mentioned by Maria, that is the Russian international lady or foreign affairs spokesperson. And I think her surname is Shaparova, something like that. But she mentioned in one of her media, commentaries, where she has mentioned that although that is the United Kingdom, that is the colonizers, try by all means to try and see if they can get the Maoris to succumb or basically to capitulate to their authority, they were unfortunately unsuccessful. So that then basically just then to provide then the necessary context as to why myself and Ryne were actually of the firm view that when one have regard to this 1835 declaration, that indeed they have sovereignty which they have never given up. And also then secondly, based on this sovereignty, they are then by right entitled to bring to bear the necessary legal proceedings based on the unique legal proceedings, which is based on Tikanga law. And that is not your LAW, it is your LORE. And based on Tikanga law, which literally basically means the right process, that the perpetrators can then be held accountable for what they have done in New Zealand, with the main objective as well also that once the necessary impetus, we could have actually gotten the necessary impetus within New Zealand, and Maori being indigenous to New Zealand, that will then create the necessary impetus then to all the First Nations worldwide to actually stand up and claim back their sovereignty, which to some extent they have then lost throughout the trickery of the colonialists throughout the world. So then once again, in reference then to this news, to this article, I just want to highlight that Ryne and myself, we have not been involved in the grand jury model proceedings. We had a number of discussions, we had a number of meetings with the Maori government up until to the point where we've informed them that there's no way that they can work in isolation. They're going to have to bring on board all the other Maori groups within New Zealand if it is that this whole initiative in New Zealand can then be a success. Unfortunately, that is then not what happened, and they then decided that they will then proceed keeping these particular perpetrators, and that is also then the 118 parliamentarians in New Zealand accountable.
Dexter, that was good to hear. The 22nd of October, in the same Expose, it was an article who says like this, quote, New Zealand is a crime scene. In one clinic, in one day, 30 people were COVID injected and all 30 have died. Mm-hmm. And this is real interesting to the whole thing about New Zealand. Mm-hmm. And this is an article, we will put the link under this interview together with the Maori Expose link, so people can follow it. Emil did a short, we did a short video as we translated that Emil fixed with Swedish text, so we have it put it up in Sweden under review, Sverige Granskas channel on Rumble, so people can see it, and it's a lot of people who has been watching that. So what is the conclusion about the Maori project for the Maoris? It's a failure because they couldn't get together, or what is your opinion?
Okay. Once again, just when it comes to the article that you've mentioned, there is an article which I have also read, and I actually found it quite interesting. In a matter of fact, there is also there is a short little video that has been made public, but it's some time ago, where a number of doctors on the forefront that was all giving advice in favor of the COVID-19 injections in New Zealand, where it is clearly basically put out to the public that they were miserably wrong in their advice to have actually advised that is New Zealanders, that is your Kiwis, to actually then take this COVID-19 injection. So it does not come as any surprise that the expose article actually makes mention that is 30, but I can say based on the communications we had, there are a number of citizens within New Zealand who has been negatively impacted as a consequence of this COVID-19 pandemic. So in us then, what I have mentioned is that unfortunately, due to the fact that we could not get all the different factions to come together, we have ultimately then decided that we're going to have to actually then pull out of the Maori initiative, and that is then communication which has then been made known to the people that we have actually worked with in New Zealand. But that does not say that Maori and can still continue to do, like, for example, what the Wakamaninga Maori government has actually done. If it is that they can still not come to a point where they can work together, they can then, in their own respective communities, hapus, they can then work continuously to shine more light to the offences that has been committed during this COVID-19 pandemic period. Unfortunately, due to the fact that we have invested so much time and effort, that's myself and Ryne, and some weeks, it was almost like 3 Zoom meetings we had to attend on a weekly basis. So as a result that we could not, like I've said, we could not actually get them to unify. We had to ultimately then move on. And where we are at now, just to inform then your listeners, is that we are now currently on the African continent, and we are currently working with a group of lawyers on the African continent, where we are actually looking at ways as to how we can set up an inquiry on the African continent. And what also makes this unique, the African initiative, is that we will be working closely with a number of lawyers on the African continent who is awake, who knows exactly as to what's going on. And with the said inquiry that we have in mind is then where we will bring much more awareness on the African continent, and also then present the necessary evidence to a panel on the African continent, where they can then make a necessary or the much needed give the much needed outcome as to whether indeed we are talking about crimes against humanity that has been committed on the populace here on the African continent. But more information to that effect will be made known once all the necessary infrastructure has been put in place. Then myself and Ryne, we will actually give them much more information concerning that, so that people all over the world will then be able to follow our initiative here on the African continent. And I mean, when we talk about Africa, we are talking about 54 countries, which is quite a large number of countries. And I believe that from the 54 countries, we will be able to get quite a lot of buy-in from the populace on the African continent.
Dexter, as I remember, South Africa did a high court decision about those contracts between Pfizer and the South African government. It's out there now since a time ago, and the same happened now, but not in the same way here in Europe. The contract between Pfizer and the European Union leaked out last week. So now they're happening a lot of things after that, of course. As you see it in South Africa, since the High Court decision was about doing those contracts between Pfizer and these other companies official, what do you think or what do you see happens in South Africa about that issue?
That's quite a very important issue that you have just mentioned, and that decision in itself made me so happy, because I can recall when we started with the inquiry, and I started to work with Ryne and all the other international attorneys, one of the huge big question marks was that we need to be able to get to understand what was basically written within the said contracts. And we know during the height of the pandemic, that was basically an impossible task. So in light then of the case that has been presented, that is then to the Pretoria High Court, the capital here in South Africa, and the judge ultimately then sided with the applicants on the basis that it is of society's interest that a contract needs to be made available. So at the moment, I do not know as to what is going to be the next move. And when I say the next move here in South Africa, that is for the applicants who has actually instituted the said claim. Was it more likely that they just wanted to get the content of the contract, or was it more than to the extent where they wanted to say, okay, well, once we have the contract, we will then be able to implement certain other judicial processes in order then to get the necessary relief. What I can then say, there are a number of attorneys here in South Africa that is working around the clock in order then to expose the COVID-19 pandemic here in South Africa. And obviously, as a big win is then finally where we as the citizens in South Africa could now ultimately see the content of the contract that has been entered. And I mean, the contract has been made public, and from the contract itself, it is quite clear that the South African government were quite aware that when we talk about the COVID-19 vaccines, that there were no appropriate long-term results as to what can be the after effect of this the injection once a person then basically gets or subject himself being injected with this COVID-19 injection. So it is clear that now that South Africans understand that the South African government were not upfront, but also in light of all the governments worldwide, because they were all in lockstep and they were not upfront in informing that is their respective citizens that there are a lot of questions that can unfortunately not be answered. I think one of the worst things is that now seeing that it is coming to light that the South Africans can now hold the government accountable, because now we are talking about coercion, we are talking about the South African populace, the citizens being coaxed. We are talking about even to the extent where we can even say fraud, because they knew what was actually contained in the contract. They knew what they have actually signed up with. And unfortunately, due to the fact that they were in lockstep with all the other countries, that is then a clear indication that this COVID pandemic came from the upper lunches, people who's basically controlling the world. And in light of that, we can then say the World Health Organization and the fact that they were not upfront with, excuse me, with the citizens of South Africa, I believe that should be more than sufficient grounds for the citizens of South Africa to hold the government here in South Africa, the Department of Health, that is also then the regulatory bodies here in South Africa accountable, that they have fraudulently and intentionally, maliciously placed all the citizens in harm's way because they were not upfront with the truth.
This is very important, Dexter. I saw a number in something I read this week. In United States, there is only 2% of the citizens in the United States who can think to take a booster of this shit injections. So in United States, it's rolling out quickly. People understand. And I think in Europe, after the leak of this contract between Pfizer and the European Union, and all that work we have done together, everyone who is sitting in the booth as you are and as Emil and me, and are interested in this big fraud against humanity, because this was planned, everything from the day one, with the PCR tests, with the fraud to frighten people and get them in a WHO terror agenda, together with those 194 members of WHO, who is an organization with Bill Gates and the big pharma, and it's a non-government organization, and we know these guys are working as we can say mafia criminals, because this is, as you told us, crimes against humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can it be worse or can it be better?
You know what? I believe that it can only just get better. And the reason why I say so is that there is a massive awakening currently happening worldwide. I mean, the article that you just mentioned as well, also where we talk about 2% in the United States. I mean, if we have to compare it to when this whole pandemic basically started, that is a massive, massive difference. So that is then a clear indication that people are waking up. I can also speak from the African context as well, is that when I look at social media here in South Africa and in a broader context on the African continent, a lot of the populace on the African continent is now to the extent where they realize that they've actually been taken for a ride. They realize that they have actually been deceived. But with that said, there was not a huge number of the populace on the African continent who has actually partaken in this COVID-19 vaccine experiment. And the ones that has actually taken the COVID-19 injections, when one actually posed them, or when one posed the question to them and say, are you going to take any booster? The first answer that basically comes and what they basically inform you is that under no circumstances are they going to take that COVID-19 vaccine, booster, you name it. It can actually come in any kind of form. They are just not going to be interested. And then the reasoning behind it is because now they can get to see that the family members, the friends who has not taken the injection, they are all well. Nothing wrong with them. So in a matter of fact, they've got now a foreign substance in their body, and they realize that they've actually made a massive mistake. And I believe that having then regard that a lot of information is now also coming to the fore worldwide, and then in particular in the United States, Europe, and even to some extent on the African continent, I can say that the governments know very well that there is going to be an opening of the floodgates where people are now going to start instituting the necessary legal proceedings against the government. It is going to be up for the judiciary worldwide to really come to the fore. And what I basically mean by that is that they're going to have to adjudicate this matter independently, impartially. But as we know, up until now and throughout this whole time period, we know that the judiciary worldwide has been compromised because there is no logical explanation that anyone can give worldwide as to why is it that no country and no judiciary up to date has actually looked at the merits of this COVID-19 pandemic. And that is one of the main reasons as to why myself and Ryne and with the other international attorneys, we wanted an independent judiciary, an independent platform where we can then present the necessary evidence, because it has been so difficult, and to some extent it is still very difficult to get any court in any country to actually look at the merits of the case. But unfortunately, well, I'd rather say fortunately for the citizens worldwide, we are definitely winning the battle. And the government and those people who were on the forefront, and we are talking about the Bill Gates, we are talking about the World Health Organization, we are talking about the World Economic Forum, and all the deep staters, they know very well that there is no way that they will be able to keep a lid on this awakening process. There's no way that they will be able to keep a lid on people, and for people not then to institute the necessary legal relief or institute a necessary legal remedy for the wrongs that has actually been committed to them. But this is going to be the ultimate test for the judiciary. And if the judiciary worldwide then fails, then it is a clear indication that the judiciaries worldwide has actually been captured. and the populace will have to actually then come to a point, and they will have to hold not just the executives accountable, but they will have to actually hold the judiciary accountable as well for them not protecting the oaths in the first place.
We can do it like this, I think, and you have to correct me if I'm wrong. The WHO and those bastards are together with 194 countries, and those countries and those governments from those countries is not for the people, they are against the people, and they know what they have done. That's why those contracts didn't came out in public from beginning. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. That is correct. They know exactly what they've done was wrong at the beginning. And I think each and every judge that is worth its metal, that is impartial, just with that simple question. And I mean, I'm looking here at South Africa, and I know the government has put up a very fierce fight for the contract not to be made public. But the judge here in South Africa said there is no way that a contract of that nature can actually be kept in secret, because for the main reason that society has been impacted, and society will continue to be impacted. And on that fundamental ground, that is then what he then stated, that is going to have to make public. So one, yes, the governments knew very well the nature of the contract that they've entered into. They knew very well the terms and conditions that all these pharmaceutical companies has actually set up. And it is also very clear that when it came to our governments having entered into the said contracts, they did not have any liberty per se to dictate, or basically then to put forward the terms and conditions or to some extent of the contract. But that in itself should have actually then also alerted our governments to say that you as pharmaceutical governments presenting us a one-sided unilateral contract, and it's almost like you're keeping a gun against our heads, and that is that it's a matter of take it or leave it. We are going to try and see if we can get any other alternatives. But we can say that is not what unfortunately happened within our governments. They have allowed themselves to have been coerced, but also to the following extent as well, also that they were in a lockstep without a shadow of a doubt. So it is clear, like I've said previously, is that our respective governments worldwide know that they will have to answer for what they have done. And I mean, for them still to be fighting for these contracts not to be made public is a clear indication that they knew exactly what they've entered, they've actually signed up to. But now, unfortunately for them, or will I say fortunately for us, they now going to have to actually answer and face the consequence, because we are clearly talking about crimes that has been committed against humanity. And what actually is worst is the fact that we are talking about our own respective governments, who we are supposed to revere and who is supposed to have our best interest at heart. Unfortunately, they have betrayed all of us.
And the governments in those 194 countries who is connected with the mob, the WHO and their terror agenda against the people worldwide, the humanity, they are acting with our tax monies in all those countries. And we also know that these injections, I saw an article, a study about this from the south part of the world, 17 million people have died from these injections. It's a killing weapon, it's a bioweapon. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, when we are talking about Kensington, I believe.
Kingston.
Kingston, yes. Thank you very much for correcting me.
Yep.
She has basically brought it to the fore that when we talk about the COVID-19, we are actually talking about a bioweapon. And that has been confirmed by Dr. Martin, and there is Dr. McCulloch as well also, and then a lot of other doctors who has actually confirmed to the citizens worldwide that when we talk about the COVID-19 pandemic, we are not talking, I mean, the COVID-19 vaccines, we are not talking about a vaccine per se, but we are talking about a bioweapon. So what you've said, absolutely, I agree with it. 100%. And what just needs to happen is that we as the populace worldwide, we're going to have to continue to keep the pressure on our respective governments, because if we do not do it now and we say, oh well, maybe perhaps things are going to change within the next a few years or the next generation, unfortunately that is not going to happen. And if we do not win this battle, then it's going to be very difficult for our children and our children's children, that's the next generation, to have any good success in actually turning the boat around and then in favor of humanity. So we're going to have to actually continue with all our efforts, and we have to keep our governments responsible. And I mean, I'm talking about being, I mean, it's, and I'm speaking from a perspective as a lawyer. It does not, and I mean, that is what I have been taught in law school. It does not matter as to who your client is. It does not matter as to what extent you need to go in order then to defend your client. Most importantly, as long as it is ethical and you do it on an ethical basis. And then most importantly as well also is that you have then the necessary evidence and the facts to actually then defend your client, because you have to do what you have to do without fear and favor. So if the perpetrator is the government, then the government is going to have to actually answer for what they have done to the people and their respective citizens.
In respect of what you told us now, I also have to mention the professor in international law, Francis A. Boyle from the United States. He was, as I remember, the first who got out and told that this COVID-19 was a bioweapon produced in a biolab, and it was spread out or leaked out from the Wuhan lab. And that's, I think it's confirmed to 100% now. It was planned, everything, so why should it leak out? It was sprayed out or something like that. It will come some more about that, because you can't hold your horses now. The horses all over the world in this issue is shining, and they are running quickly, and I think the humanity is winning over those governments and WHO, the 194 countries who are not working for the taxpayers. They are working for an agenda to make probably a world government and have total control and total tyranny and total fascism. And I think in Sweden we have fascism already, because if our government is working together with the WHO and their terror agenda, they are not working for the people. They are in a position that we can take them to court about high treason and crimes against the humanity and genocide. And it was also a ground from big money. Mm-hmm. Because someone is earning money in war, and this is a war against the humanity. Is that correct, as you see?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This is definitely a direct onslaught on humanity. Excuse me. And what I can say is that this time they've actually gone way too far. But in a sense as well, also one can say that through this pandemic, humanity has woken up. And humanity has actually realized that our governments has actually put us in a state of alarm. where we were basically sleepwalking towards our own destruction. And through this COVID-19 pandemic, people has now awoken, and they finally now realize is that when it comes to power, the power does not lie within their respective governments, but it actually resides in themselves. And that is then where we as humanity, we're going to have to take back our sovereignty, and we're going to have to hold on to that sovereignty. And under no circumstances, from the lessons that we have learned from COVID-19, and I believe all the other things as well also that is currently coming to the fore, and one of the things as well also currently as to what is happening in Israel, in Hamas, Ukraine, and Russia. There's a whole lot of information regarding about false flags in respect to those wars. I believe that humanity now get to realize that if we as humanity needs and wants to thrive on Earth, we're going to have to actually take back and hold on to our sovereignty, and under no circumstances compromise our sovereignty for the benefit that the people that's supposed to look after our best interest, that they will definitely do so, because we have now finally seen that that is unfortunately not the case. And we are talking about that is the invisible hand, or the people behind the veil, who is actually then dictating as to what should happen, when it should happen, and how it should happen, taking away that sovereignty from humanity.
Emil, I can see you have been noticed, and I think you have some questions. Please take it up.
I keep getting back to that thought or that line that Dexter said when we were talking a couple of weeks ago, and it was enough is enough, and I really think that should summarize everything. And I have a big hope in humanity, just getting that feeling that we need to stand up and do something in this. This is a breaking point for humanity. If we look in our history, you can see that separate parts of the humanity has been putting up with wars and terror agendas in different ways. But in this time, we have the whole of the humanity that's under the pressure. So this is the time, if we were to stand up as a humanity and trying to work it out, to make this a good place and a safe place for every human being on this planet. We need to come together right now and step out of the Stockholm syndrome, as we all of us in more or less grades are betrayed by.
Dexter, a question. Those doctors and those nurses who has been involved in this injection propaganda campaign and this PCR test fraud, who is still continue here in Sweden. Have you seen any reaction from the doctors and the nurses in South Africa? Do they change foot or opinion? Because here in Sweden we can't see it yet, but we have taped a lot of those people who are there, and still is propaganda for those PCR tests. How is the situation in South Africa? Have you any conclusion about that? Okay.
Yeah, in South Africa, one of the things that I must say is that those doctors that were on the forefront when this pandemic started, they are completely quiet. You hardly even hear them. You hardly even see them. And then also when it comes to your respective GPs, your general practitioners, people are now so enlightened that when they go to their GPs, and the GPs actually tells them that you're going to have to actually take this vaccine, they are now in a better position to present a counter argument as to why the COVID-19 vaccine is not a vaccine. So in short, I will say that like I said, the people or the doctors, the nurses that has been on the forefront, it's actually quite strange that you no longer even see them or hear them. Because I believe that they also now get to realize that what they have presented to the public and the citizens here in South Africa was unfortunately not truthful, And having regard to the contract, it has actually also now come to the fore. They now realize that the back is against the wall. And one of the things that I will clearly understand, reflect on is whenever I was driving during the height of the pandemic, there were a certain specific medical professionals where they were just coming out with guns blazing. And then in Afrikaans, they used to actually say fake news, which in America or in the English language, we actually talk about a fake news. And they have put up the argument that those people and those doctors who is actually outspoken, that is merely based on fake news, and they must be held accountable. They are nowhere to be seen. So that for me is then a clear indication that the medical profession, and especially those that were on the forefront, they now realize that they have got very little to go on in order then to keep on the pressure and for the people then to continue participate in this COVID-19 experimental vaccination process. Even now at the moment, it is difficult if you need to actually go and get vaccination. In the past, you could actually just around each and every corner, you will actually get a vaccinated place. But now it's very, very difficult to actually get a place or even a clinic that will readily basically just make available that vaccination, and also even the PCR test itself. Yeah, I can recall with one of my consultations where a client actually said, but the work wanted him to present a PCR test, and this is a couple of months ago on a weekly basis, but he said it is so difficult even to get a facility in South Africa or where he lives to get then that PCR test done. So for me, that is a clear indication that we are most definitely winning the battle against this fake COVID-19 pandemic narrative that has actually been put out by the government and even by the doctors who were on the forefront. And I need to also then say is that worldwide, those doctors and those medical professionals who were on the forefront and who were all in cahoots in putting that pressure on their patients and on the citizens per se, they must be held accountable, because why they have actually gone against their basic oath, and that is when we talk about informed consent. So they have taken away that fundamental, basic human sovereign principle concerning health, and that is consent. They have taken away. They have taken that away, and on that basis, they've actually then coerced their patients and the citizens that they have actually spoken to when they have presented their false narrative that the COVID-19 vaccines were safe and effective, which now they cannot deny. The contract is clear. The pharmaceutical companies and even the government here in South Africa clearly, based on the contract, clearly stated that there's just no certainty when it comes to long-term effects. When it comes to studies that has actually been done, there's no extensive studies that has also been done. So they realize now that they're going to have to answer for what they've done.
You took up a very important issue about informed consent. How in hell could anyone in humanity give informed consent when the governments and the WHO and the producers, Pfizer and Moderna, don't expose their own products? They hide them in those contracts. And we know, as we spoke about it in this interview, that a lot of people who are really experts, as Francis A. Boyle, Karen Kingston, David E. Martin, Peter McCulloch, and so weiter, know this is a bioweapon. How can you, as a moral issue, as a doctor and a nurse, tell people in their eyes that they secured that the people who was injected and in a form of terror, frightened situation, how could they have given informed consent to a medical experiment that the staff, the doctors and nurses didn't inform them at all about? Informed consent is a very important thing. We have a law in Sweden, and I think you have a law in South Africa too. And we have it also in the Nuremberg Convention. Have they any moral, these doctors? Have they any ethics, these doctors and nurses? It's very important.
Sorry, Ulf. Yeah, what you've mentioned is so important, and I am happy that you are highlighting informed consent. And once again, having reference then to the contract in South Africa that has been made known to the citizens in South Africa, any doctor, any nurse now clearly understand that there is no basis that they can look the patient in the eye and continue with the false narrative that the vaccines are safe and effective. So I will say, and which I've already said, is that this is medical doctors and this is nurses that must be held accountable. If we don't want this to happen ever again in the future, we're going to have to keep these doctors accountable. And then in particular, those that were instrumental in coercing, instrumental in formulating a policy to the detriment of informed consent, those ones, no way that they can actually get off it. They must be held accountable so that people and humanity can get to understand, and the generations of doctors coming, they will realize that it is important that you cannot mingle in sovereignty of an individual, and you cannot interfere with any informed consent. I've got a twin brother. He's a medical doctor as well, also here in South Africa, and he has been quite clear that there is no way that he is going to advise any of his patients to take any of these vaccines, because there is questions which he cannot answer. And on the basis that he cannot answer fundamental questions, one of those being how safe and effective is it? That is fundamental. And these doctors openly lied. Why? Because they were taking the information from the narrative which was force-fed to them via the media, mainstream media, and also via the respective health regulatory bodies, without them applying their minds. And that is then the basis on which they must be held accountable. And unfortunately, there cannot be any compromises when it comes to it. Like I've said, if we don't do it, it is more likely going to happen going forward.
As we can see a picture, those pirates, when they fought in boats against people who was traveling around the world with a lot of values in their boats, when they sank a pirate ship, even the rats try to swim away, but they can't do it in this issue. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's no way that they can get around it. The contract is what it is. And the fact is they can also not hide that they were following instructions. Why is it then? And that's the main question. And that is the question that I've actually posed to a South African doctor who has presented evidence in the grand jury model proceedings. And I've said, but what makes you unique on the basis that you as a medical doctor in South Africa, you said there's just things that just does not add up. So why is it not that any of the other doctors, very same question that they could have and should have actually posed to themselves, critically apply their minds and then come up with the ultimate conclusion that these vaccines are not safe and effective. And you cannot present to your patients information that you get from mainstream media, information that you actually get even from government as well. You are the doctor, and you've got a direct responsibility towards your patient, and nobody can interfere with that relationship. And that is currently what the World Health Organization wants to do. They want to interfere between doctor and patient relationship itself. And that is a massive problem. And on that basis, one can then clearly say that there is a sufficient argument that can be presented in any court of law that these medical doctors did not apply their minds, they did not put on the critical thinking caps, and unfortunately they have allowed a lot of the patients to have succumbed due to their ignorance, due to their arrogance, and due to the fact that they have not allowed their respective patients to enact, sorry, not enact is not the right word, for their respective patients to exercise their constitutionally, the constitutional right of informed consent. So on that basis, I will then say that it is clear that the necessary examples needs to be made, and these doctors need to be held accountable.
Very good. Thank you for that explanation and the strength in your voice, Dexter. I love it. I really love it, because this is very important, because a bioweapon has been injected to over 5 billion people all over the world, I think. And these doctors, they have no moral at all. And they don't come forward now in the media. They are cowards. They have no moral. They have no ethics. They just follow the money. And that's a shit of a lot of people without moral. And probably a lot of them are sociopaths. And we will continue in that in another time. We have to stop now because we have used about 1 hour, as we told about. Email, you will get 1 minute first, and then Dexter will have 1 minute to make your conclusions, and we will end after that. Please email.
The summarization of this interview. I'm really glad about meeting Dexter and seeing his work, and hopefully more people like Dexter in this situation needs to stand up, who both have the capacity in the mind and as well as the moral compass. So we need a lot of more Dexters showing up in this situation that we are in right now. And I'm, as you know, we are soon getting into our new COVID situation, and that's going to be an interesting fight to take, because now every information is on the table. So we need to execute it and really underline the consent part and the part with the PCR tests. So we got the key points and how we're going to be able to get this situation that we're heading into to get out of it and going in the right direction, I hope.
The house of cards will fall totally down with the PCR test fraud. That's the conclusion in that bit. Dexter, please take your minute.
Thank you so much, Ulf. I want to say thank you, Ulf. Thank you, Emil, for this opportunity, so that I can basically share the kind of work that I've actually done up until now. And I really appreciate it. I can completely agree to what you've just said, Emil. And to the extent that we as humanity, we are winning this war. And there is no way that we can basically let the gauntlet down. We're going to have to keep on running and know that nothing and no one can stop us. And I am confident in the resolute of humanity. And that is that if one have a look, historical look as to all the trials and tribulations that humanity has actually was faced with, humanity always came out as the winner. And I am confident that this COVID-19 pandemic, that we are more than victorious as humanity, and we are going to continue to win and keep these perpetrators who has perpetrated one of the most worst human atrocities on mankind, keep them accountable. So as humanity, we have to keep on fighting. And thank you once again, Ulf and Emil, for this opportunity granted to me. Thank you.
Those government who is working together with the WHO, they are doomed, because they are not the taxpayers guys. They are working with the mob, the WHO, and the terror agenda with the PCR tests and those bioweapon injections, who is 100% clear. No one can fly away from those facts and those proofs, and humanity is winning. Enough is enough.
Indeed, enough is enough.
Thank you very much, Emil, Borg, and Dexter, for a very, very interesting and very, very important interview. Bye-bye. Till we see you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.